Debt verdict, DV025 title, Dance Mom star hid $775 during bankruptcy. Formula horror, duration 10 min. Tags, Abby Lee Miller, bankruptcy fraud, Dance Moms, hidden assets, federal investigation. Abby Lee Miller filed for bankruptcy in 2010, claiming she was drowning in $400,000 of debt. She told the court she couldn't pay her creditors. She listed her assets. She signed the forms under penalty of perjury. And then she walked onto a television set and started spending money on camera. What federal investigators eventually found was stunning. $775,000 hidden in secret bank accounts, squirreled away while Miller swore to a bankruptcy judge that she had nothing. The evidence that convicted her? Her own reality show. This is the story of how the star of Dance Moms committed bankruptcy fraud in front of millions of viewers, and how the federal government used her own footage to put her behind bars. Bankruptcy in the United States is governed by Title 11 of the United States Code. It exists to give honest debtors a fresh start, a chance to discharge overwhelming debts and rebuild. The system is built on one non-negotiable foundation: total honesty. When you file for bankruptcy, you are required to disclose every asset you own, every bank account, every piece of property, every source of income, every financial interest, no matter how small. You sign these disclosures under oath. Lying on a bankruptcy petition is a federal crime, bankruptcy fraud, punishable by up to 5 years in prison and fines of up to $250,000. The system works on trust. Bankruptcy trustees don't have the resources to independently investigate every filing. They rely on the debtor's sworn disclosures. When a debtor lies, the entire system is undermined. Creditors who are owed legitimate debts receive less or nothing. The system depends on voluntary compliance. Abby Lee Miller was about to test that system in spectacular fashion. Abigail Lee Miller was born on September 21, 1965, in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. She grew up in the dance studio her mother, Marion Lorraine Miller, founded in 1980, the Abby Lee Dance Company, located in the suburb of Penn Hills. By the time Miller filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy on November 18, 2010, she was a regional figure in the competitive dance world, but not yet a national celebrity. Her dance studio had accumulated debts, and she sought bankruptcy protection to reorganize. In her filings, Miller listed approximately $400,000 in liabilities. Then, on July 13, 2011, everything changed. Lifetime Television premiered Dance Moms. Miller's abrasive teaching style and explosive confrontations made her a reality TV sensation. The show ran 7 seasons. Miller became famous, and Miller started making significant money. Here's where the fraud began. According to the federal indictment filed October 13, 2015, Miller concealed approximately $775,000 in income between 2012 and 2013, while her bankruptcy case was still active. She funneled money from television appearances, dance conventions, and merchandise into bank accounts not disclosed to the bankruptcy trustee. She also committed a second offense. Returning from Australia in 2014, Miller allegedly divided approximately $120,000 in currency among herself and others, so no single person carried more than $10,000, the threshold that triggers a mandatory transaction report to the U.S. Treasury. This is called structuring, a separate federal crime under 31 U.S.C. Section 5324. The investigation was conducted by IRS Criminal Investigation and the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Western District of Pennsylvania. Investigators had an unusual advantage: hundreds of hours of television footage showing Miller's lifestyle during the exact period she claimed to be broke. The reality show became the prosecution's evidence file. Episodes showed Miller traveling, spending on costumes and productions, running her business, living a life visibly inconsistent with someone who'd told a bankruptcy court she was financially distressed. On October 13, 2015, a federal grand jury indicted Miller on 20 counts: bankruptcy fraud, concealment of assets, false declarations, and structuring. Miller initially pleaded not guilty, but as the evidence mounted, bank records, financial documents, and the show's own footage, the case became overwhelming. On June 27, 2016, Miller changed her plea. She pleaded guilty to 1 count of bankruptcy fraud, concealment of assets, and 1 count of structuring currency transactions. The remaining 18 counts were dropped as part of the plea agreement. Sentencing was set for May 8, 2017. The federal sentencing guidelines recommended 18 to 24 months. Prosecutors asked the court to impose a sentence within that range. Miller's defense attorneys argued for leniency, citing her lack of prior criminal history and her willingness to accept responsibility. They asked for probation. Judge Joy Flowers Conti of the U.S. District Court for the Western District of Pennsylvania was not persuaded. On May 8, 2017, Judge Conti sentenced Abby Lee Miller to 1 year and 1 day in federal prison, followed by 2 years of supervised release. The judge also imposed a fine of $40,000 and ordered Miller to pay a judgment of $120,000, the amount involved in the structuring offense. During sentencing, Judge Conti addressed Miller directly. The judge's remarks, reported by multiple news outlets present in the courtroom, were pointed. The judge noted that Miller had lived a double life, presenting one financial picture to the bankruptcy court while living an entirely different reality on television. 1 year and 1 day, not arbitrary. Under federal law, that specific length makes a defendant eligible for good time credit, reducing time served by up to 15%. Exactly 12 months does not qualify. Miller reported to Federal Correctional Institution, Victorville, California, on July 12, 2017. She served roughly 8 months before release to a halfway house. On April 10, 2018, while still in the halfway house, Miller underwent emergency spinal surgery after being diagnosed with Burkitt lymphoma, a rare, aggressive non-Hodgkin lymphoma. The cancer had formed a mass on her spine. She couldn't walk. Multiple rounds of chemotherapy followed while still under federal custody. By August 2018, she announced she was cancer-free, though confined to a wheelchair. The conviction remains on her record. The $775,000 she hid was not a gray area, not an accounting mistake, a deliberate scheme to conceal income from a court distributing assets fairly among her creditors. The irony is almost too perfect. Miller's brand was built on discipline and accountability. She screamed at children for small mistakes. She berated mothers for excuses. Then she lied to a federal court while cameras recorded the proof. Bankruptcy fraud is heavily investigated. The U.S. trustee program monitors filings using financial databases, tax records, and public records. Miller got caught partly because of her public lifestyle. But you don't need a TV show to get caught. Undisclosed accounts leave trails. Unreported income generates tax documents. Hidden assets create patterns investigators are trained to find. If you're considering bankruptcy, be completely honest. Disclose everything. The system works when used honestly. If you try to game it, consequences are severe. Federal felony, prison, fines, a criminal record for life, and your case gets dismissed. You lose the protection you sought. Abby Lee Miller hid $775,000 and got 1 year in federal prison. She thought no one would notice. A federal grand jury noticed, and so did the